Callahan? Mrs. Gallagher?
Here.
Mr. Kraftcheck? Here. Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Parzak?
Here.
Mrs. Rich?
Here.
The meeting is now open. Adequate notice of the meeting was provided by posting a copy of the time and place on the municipal clerk's bulletin board and mailing a copy of same to the press and the Cape May County Herald on January 4th, 2019. Will everyone please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up is the illustrious
No.
Dr. Stu Farrell.
A little backstory before he speaks. Stu was asked to do our watershed management plan, and in the process of that, he's identified certain things that we can put on the books that potentially get us additional points under the CRS program. We did meet internally last week and came up with a suggestion, which is also on here, a draft that Paul Cates had put together on natural channels, which technically we don't have any, but if we have it on the books, you do get credit for it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Stu. Thank you.
She basically covered the story, but the watershed management CRS points are broken up into 8 different subcategories. And category 6 and 7 has to do with, do you protect your natural channels from structural hardening, straightening, realigning, and other sort of things. This was written originally for riverine towns so that river channels would be left in their natural state as much as possible. Barrier Islands, at least here on the Jersey Shore, just don't have river channels, but your friends to the north at Sea Isle discovered that if you had an ordinance that prohibited the structural modification of mosquito ditches, but you call them channels, not mosquito ditches, and other such things. You just had, I need an ordinance number and a name. And then I put that in for WMP 6 and another one in for WMP 7. And Sea Isle City got the points because they prohibited it by ordinance, the alteration of natural channels and drainage ways within the city boundaries. Basically, it's just something that FEMA wants to do, and if you do it, you get the points for it. It's like one is 35 points, the other one's 25 points. So, you know, it's an added 55 points, or no, actually it's a little more, 60 points that accrue for the total. The total is like 725 or 735 points for the entire WMP in its entirety. And then finally, the last thing we talked about was the 8th category, where you create a budgetary line item which contains an unspecified amount of money, probably in the range of $5,000 to $10,000 annually, for implementing the watershed management plan once it's adopted. Once you adopt the management plan for how you're going to deal with the waterways, the stormwater system, the nuisance flooding, all these other things that go with it, if you have this line item, you get points for WMP 8 as well. You don't have to spend the money. It says so right in the regulations that the money is not obligated to be spent. You just have to have it available as a budgetary line item, that it is there if you need to spend something in terms of implementing the plan to change the stormwater culvert height, or put in a couple of more tide flex valves or something along those lines. The money's there. It's already set up in a way that the FEMA review team can say, yep, they're covered. Basically, that's what this is 99% about. The rest of the changes that have to be made, we have to deal with. They came back and said, we want a 5-day storm event. Well, in the last 90 years, there's only been 2 3-day storm events of significance. So, but they wanted a 5-day. So we're just going to take the 3-day and stretch it, and make it a 5-day storm, and rerun the model and change a few things. And that's already is mostly done. And all I need for these pieces here, if you decide to go forward with it, is the title of the ordinance and its ordinance number, and that's it. I don't need to give them the ordinance. I don't have to give them a whole lot of words about what it does. It says what it does. So basically, that's essentially where we stand. Everything else is finished, all the work. I'm still waiting for the latest and greatest changes to the pumping stations and other development planning, not the ones that are in place, but the future. This is 5 years. This plan has a 5-year clock attached to it when it's accepted. And so you have to sort of project something into the future in terms of design, planning, or other sorts of situations that they detail.
So in your packet, you do have the ordinance. It's 345-62, additional standards, and Paul put it in as number 2, and it's highlighted under natural channels. So that's a recommendation, put that language into there. So if we could bring that forward at the next meeting, we can assign it a number, and then Stu can put it into the plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Should we take a look at Sea Isles ordinance? Have you seen
We
that?
did. We used that.
You did use it, okay,
Yes, I recommended that
Yeah.
okay,
right up front, because
Okay.
it works.
Yeah, we started from that one.
okay,
So,
okay. So we'll be bringing this forward for introduction at the first meeting in November, the ordinance changes.
This, I don't know that I know enough to really go one way or another on this. I mean, I would like to talk to Grant. I mean, how many drainage pathways do we have in this town? Do we have any dedicated open space in this town? I mean, do we?
You have bird sanctuary, you have a channel down by 118th Street, it's a ditch.
And would, how about Stone Harbor Point? Wouldn't that be, no?
Maybe.
Because this is the, and then we have the same verbiage, Stu, that we had several months ago with some other ordinance change we did, where we're talking about, again, in perpetuity here, non-buildable. I mean, is that something that we have to now make a decision that from now and forevermore in the future, we'll never build on this?
Well, you probably would not want to build on South Point, so that's probably true.
fair.
The bird sanctuary has been established for many decades. I mean, it doesn't specifically lay out where this is applied to the natural areas that exist.
It's a general statement.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not, it doesn't mean all of your open space areas, ball fields and other things, they all count as open space. But this is for the natural areas that you are seeking to prevent the modification and alteration of the natural channels, basically.
Well, okay, I have to see the,
Okay,
Whatever
and
ordinance
Grant was in that meeting also. So he,
And that, to your point, Ray, that is why we hear from Dr. Farrell, and then we'll get the wording of the language, and then we have opportunity to look at it, get your questions answered before we do any voting. We have to see what the ordinance looks like, what the wording is, and get those any concerns that any councilman has. You have ample time to take a look at it, and the public, for that matter, they have ample opportunity also, if they see something that they have concerns about.
Now, this is not something that has to be done immediately, but it
Right.
will be helpful if it goes in for review with this stuff in it if you
Yeah.
decide to go ahead. That just means you get more points for the activity, which is beneficial in a way.
and we have 3 weeks to the next meeting, so we'll have plenty of time that you can discuss it with Grant, and then if anybody else has any other questions on it, but.
so, Stu, is there, like, when it says dedicated open space, this is your email, dedicated open space. Is there a difference between dedicated open space and open space? Like you just said, the rec fields are open space.
Well, that count, yes, there's open space which is used by human activities, and you're not gonna put, well, it's not that you never put a building on it, because you could have a restroom or other sorts of things on these. I'm just harking from what Avalon did with its 8th Street area up there at the north end of town. But it's not on the list of developable, it's not a developable lot, let's put it that way. It doesn't mean they could never develop it, but it would mean that they would lose a percentage of the open space that the municipality has. So this is you can develop ball fields and other open areas. You probably even could develop the bird sanctuary if you chose to do it. But it just reduces the amount of, it increases the impermeable surface and decreases the permeable surface, and they do kind of
Right.
rate that. It's something that they
No,
do.
I understand that. I just, like I said, I get hung up on things like,
Yeah.
so if we did this and it
What-
says dedicated open space,
Can
Yeah,
I,
we're
re-
say-
can I read, I think you're reading into his email chain, but the actual change that we're doing, if I read that to you, I think you'll feel a little bit more comfortable. It doesn't say anything about open space or dedicating or anything. It was number 2 under drainage, said natural channels shall not be modified, developed, dredged, cleared of vegetation, deepened, widened, straightened, or otherwise altered without any applicable permits issued by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection or any other state or federal entity with jurisdiction. If approved, the channel must be improved using natural approaches and should avoid the use of concrete or other hard techniques. Water should be retained or detained before it enters any natural channel in order to preserve the natural hydrodynamics of the channel and to prevent siltation or other forms of pollution. That's all we're going to add in to the ordinance. Right?
Yes, that is essentially the interpretation of the paragraph in the watershed management directive. I mean, my use in the email of open space was kind of cover everything in a kind of blanket that means different things to different people, I guess.
But again, if anybody has any questions still. And then, like I said, we'll bring it forward for the next council meeting for introduction, but in the meantime, if you have any other questions or whatever, you can reach out to me or to Grant or to Mark.
Okay?
All right,
All right?
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. Jill, you want to handle the height of decks since Ray Poudrier is not here? He couldn't make it?
Yes, 1 second. Okay, this was a topic that came up in our master plan subcommittee when we were meeting on the courts. There was a concern in terms of the way the Ray, zoning official, read the existing ordinance, and he did send everyone an explanation on his concerns and what he felt should be changed. And then what we would have to do is we would bring it forward to council, and then it would have to be sent back to scheduled to go back to the planning board to review, and then they would make the recommendation to bring it back again to council. A lot of times, we start out at the planning board, but because of his concerns, and we figured we had enough time, we would bring it forward here for everyone to look at. Was everyone able to open up the pictures that he had sent on it? Okay. for those of you that could not, I'll pass around my photos. But basically, the issue that we're looking at is whether or not it's permitted to put a deck over unusable space. The interpretation prior to Ray had always been, if it's not habitable space, you cannot put a deck on top of it.
At the third floor level.
Correct. Ray just did not feel that that's exactly what it said in here, so he's requesting that it be reworded so that it is clear moving forward, and he can then make that interpretation, which would be consistent with what the prior zoning officer did. And I will send these around, and you can look at it. This is an existing one that did get approvals because of his interpretation. So the draft that Andrew made up basically takes out in the ordinance under 560-33, originally said height of decks except for structures with flat roofs upon which the floor of the deck shall be no higher than 6 inches above roof height. The floor of an outside deck shall be no higher than the floor of the highest habitable floor in said structure. On a single-story structure, excluding those with flat roofs, the floor of an outside deck shall be no higher than 10 feet above floor level, subject to the definition of lot coverage as defined in 560-10. Andrew has inserted new language in there. Under D, height of decks, number 1, the floor of all decks located above a flat roof shall be no greater than 6 inches above the height of the roof below. The floor of all decks which are not located above a flat roof shall be no higher than the floor of the highest habitable floor in the principal structure. 3, every deck having a floor higher than the highest habitable story of the principal structure shall be situated directly above a fully enclosed habitable area. In no event shall any deck having a floor situated above 2 habitable stories be covered with a roof, fixed awning, or other permanent cover. On a single-story structure having a pitched roof, the floor of an outside deck shall be no higher than 10 feet above floor level. And that's the recommendation. Again, it's to clarify so that we can continue enforcing what we believe the intent was originally. Does anybody have any questions with that? I know we're just bringing it forward now. But
I have
it's
a comment.
Sure, yeah.
I fail to understand how something that he describes as a mistake can be turned into a policy. A mistake is a mistake. It happens once and shouldn't happen again.
Well, it's not a mistake, it's an interpretation of the wording.
Okay.
And you may read something and interpret it one way, I might read it and interpret it another. His interpretation is one way, and he feels that in order for it to continue, he's recommending the change in the language. Andrew did review it and did agree that the language should be changed to make it clearer, to make it more defensible if anyone were to appeal it. So that's the recommendation. The prior zoning official, I believe, having the advantage of being here when it was originally crafted, understood what the intent was, so based the opinion on the intent, not necessarily the exact language. So we're trying to make it clear because you never know, if our current zoning official leaves, somebody else comes in, same thing may happen where someone's not clear on the interpretation of it and not knowing the intent may render a certain decision. So we're trying, as these things come up, we're trying to make our ordinances more precise, clearer, so that everybody understands what that intent is.
It seems to me that he caved when confronted with an objection to show me where it is in the ordinance. And he, instead of seeking consultation with someone else, somebody above his pay grade, is something that he should have done.
No, I don't think that's what happened. No, that isn't what, he didn't cave, he approved it. He approved it thinking he was, that was his, he made a determination and interpretation. It was done, it was approved, it was built.
Yep.
Somebody said, since when do we allow this? And he said, that's my interpretation. And he was told, no, that is not,
Not the intent.
traditionally, or this is where they have not been approved.
Correct.
And he said, well, that's not how I read it, and if this is something we want to continue in town, then we don't touch the language. If we don't want this to continue in town, we have to touch the language.
Correct. And that was confirmed by the planning board solicitor.
What he says here, and what concerned me and how I came to the conclusion that he caved, was he challenged my interpretation, asking where this is in the ordinance.
How many,
I'm going by the conversation I had with him and how it came to be.
I'm going by what he wrote here.
I think,
how many of these do we have?
There's one right now. so
Only
we're-
one?
Right, so that's
Because
why
it's
we
the
want-
first one he approved.
I think Frank is right. I think Ray, the way I understand it, he enforced the intent of the regulation or the ordinance as it's been interpreted for the past 25 years.
No, he did the opposite.
No, I don't think so. I think he did, and he turned it down. And the developer came back to him and said, well, show me where it says this, that I can't do it. And then when he looked at the ordinance doesn't specifically say you can't do
Right.
this. So I wouldn't use
I,
the word
okay,
cave.
I thought it was the opposite,
go by-
that after it was
You
built.
had to go by the ordinance as it's written, and that's why he's asking that we, more clearly define what Stone Harbor wants to allow in these kind of structures.
I guess
That's
my
what this
response
does.
would be, in the event of an interpretation of how the ordinance is written, he should have gone to a higher authority. He should have gone to somebody else. He shouldn't have made
Well-
that decision on his own.
Well, understood. If he had gone to the planning board solicitor, the planning board solicitor would have said, I agree with you the way it's written. It's not prohibited, so he is recommending the change. Prior zoning official interpreted it one way. That doesn't necessarily mean that the solicitor felt that that's what it said. No one challenged the opinion of the prior zoning officer, and it just continued. The way it's written, our planning board attorney feels that it is ambiguous, and his interpretation based on the way it was written is correct.
But wasn't,
Regardless of whether someone challenged it or not, the way it's written, and the mayor said it, if council is okay with allowing these, then we just leave it the way it is, and he will continue with that interpretation. If council does not want that and wants to go back to where in the past they were denied based on someone's opinion, then let's make it clear so it's defensible moving forward, changing the language,
but
basically.
Andrew Catanese, no disrespect, I would say it if he's sitting here, was on the planning board when we did all this.
If he was not, if he wasn't asked the question, which is pretty much what you're saying, prior, he was not asked the question, it was just enforced based on an interpretation, and no one challenged the prior zoning official.
For 25 years, no one challenged the zoning
Correct.
official.
Correct.
And then we have a change in the zoning official, and all of a sudden, somebody challenges that interpretation, and I can't think of another word except cave.
Except I would say, I wouldn't use the word caved. He saw the other person's logic.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily caved where he,
It goes away from what the borough had done for 25 previous years. And that in my mind, that precedent is as valid as making changes in the ordinance. There's nothing
I see what you're
wrong.
saying. Right,
It-
right.
The only
It
thing
could
I'll
be,
add-
yeah, it could be. However, I would recommend to you, if someone's pointing out to me that the language is not necessarily written the way your intent was, I would be saying to you, like I am now, let's change it moving forward, so you don't find yourself in this position. Mark, would you agree or disagree with that?
So zoning appeals are costly. Obviously, the customary interpretation of an ordinance is something you can present to a court.
Right.
Why put yourselves in that position if you don't have to? If by simply adopting an amendment to the ordinance that clarifies it, you eliminate the possibility of spending that money on a lawsuit?
Right.
And if the planning board attorney is recommending it and the zoning official charged with it is recommending it, I would probably say, hey, for the trouble it's going to take,
Right.
make the change.
Yeah, and that would be my recommendation, just so it's clear moving forward, regardless of what's happened in the past. I say, let's clean it up.
I'd just like to add also, this is not the first, nor do I think it will
Correct.
be the last type of situation where we're really looking hard at our ordinances with regard to planning and construction. For instance, recently in the X zone, there was no height limitation. There's none on our books. That was for as far back as our zoning ordinance categorized an X zone. Nothing. You could have built, and someone could have challenged the zoning officer on a 52-foot structure, as long as it's single-family residential. So I think this is just another example of delving into what we have on our books and making sure that everything's airtight to keep things, as we all see fit in Stone Harbor. So I don't think this is the first. I know it's not the first, and I don't think it'll be the last.
No, it's not, I mean, and Ray has brought other ordinances to us that when he's been reading them, he felt that it didn't necessarily read the way prior interpretations were. So, I mean, and that's what he's doing. He's reviewing them. If something doesn't seem clear or is incorrect, he has been bringing them forward to us, and we've been taking action on them. So I agree, it's probably as he becomes more familiar or as things come before him, you may find other ones that we have to bring forward just to clean up.
It sounds to me just trying to clear up ambiguity.
Correct, yes, and I think that's important.
What are we allowed to do on the third floor of a property? I know there's tons of different designs, and that's a big question, but what is really allowed on a third floor?
I thought that 69 square feet of uninhabitable space is allowed on the third floor. And then if you're looking at, and Charles can correct me if I'm wrong, and if you're looking at the pictures we were just sent, whatever appears over habitable space. So when you're looking at this one that he sent to us, you can see in the top the 69 square feet, that's uninhabitable space, and then you can see that deck comes out, but where it comes out and over, these pictures?
I couldn't open them.
Oh, okay.
The third floor
So
deck,
it-
the third floor deck goes over non-habitable space.
Great. So if you didn't have that deck that was coming out there,
Right, that's
Whatever-
open space there.
whatever
Right.
that building part is behind that, on that third floor, can that be closed in with windows
No.
and be used?
No.
Oh, you mean right here?
No, the idea here, two
No.
components are
No.
really important as I see fit
No.
with this change. One is that deck can't protrude past habitable living space, so that last little section that hangs out over would have to be clipped back. The idea
Right.
being that that deck sinks into the roof line. It doesn't protrude off the building structure in the main portion of the building structure. Number two is no roof line over that third floor deck. So that would be eliminated. Now that deck is open and sinks into the rooftop and the roof line and becomes, if you will, more architecturally pleasing. It's what you see on most of the homes because that's the way they were permitted in the past. I think Ray, being Ray and being thorough and doing his job, looked at the ordinance and in earnest said, I can't not approve this. There will be a legal challenge. And so, given the interpretation that I have to stick to, I have to approve this, but let's do something about it.
And that starts to look like a third floor.
Looks like Avalon.
Sure does.
It does look like a third floor right now.
I'm going to say.
Right,
that-
that's because he approved it, right. So with the cleanup in the ordinance, that would not be approved.
Right.
And Joanne Massey would not have approved it.
I think we should all ride around town and look at the third floors of the buildings that are now built, and that might help. But I see a lot of third floors that have windows around them, and it looks like they are being used for something, and they are closed in.
You mean like that back section, that's 69 square feet?
That's permissible.
Yeah, that's
in that-
permissible.
In that landing, but your ceiling height in that non-habitable third floor is limited to 6 feet. And that's why normally when you go up to that third floor landing and you step out to a deck, the door is usually one of those, 4-foot doors that you have to, because there's a header there below the 6 feet, which now takes
Yeah.
the door height down to about 4 feet, so you're kind of ducking out to the deck. So you can have windows in the third floor, but not, you can't enclose that deck and put windows in the deck area. Obviously, that would be a violation.
So with this ordinance cleaned up, when you're looking at the pictures, there's extras if you guys want to, if, with it cleaned up, this roof here would not be permitted either.
Be gone.
Would be gone. So the only thing there would be 69 square feet with 6 feet of height
And an open deck.
and an open deck.
That
Nothing
does-
else would be there.
That does not come out over the first floor deck, or the second floor deck, excuse me.
Right, so it could come to there.
It would terminate right there, and it would be open, correct?
Okay.
So playing the devil's advocate, what happens when a builder comes or a designer comes with a similar design as this and wants to replicate exactly what they have here with the roof over that section above the habitable living space?
I guess my answer would, my answer would be if we don't touch the language and we then don't issue an approval, we're opening ourselves up for litigation because we approve somebody and nobody else, so we got to change the ordinance, so that can't happen.
Well, and there's now been precedents.
Right, correct?
Yes.
That's
You
why,
put yourself in a situation
That's why we need,
where
yeah.
that's
you
why
could be in a legal challenge.
in Ray's email to us, Frank, he says it's, time is of the essence here. If we want to continue that same interpretation, we need to make the rules more explicit so he can enforce it.
Okay. My only concern is that I hope this is not an inch-by-inch, step-by-step addition to the borough of third-floor
Right,
buildings.
that's what I'm thinking.
Say again?
Maybe we should be pulling things back a little while we're doing this instead of, I mean, is that what we want up there?
You mean the 69 square feet?
Yeah.
Get rid of that as well.
Well, I'm just saying, it's time to create. I mean,
Well, I think even
if
if, we're-
everybody understands it, I just see an awful lot of almost four-story houses, and I have no idea how that happens. Maybe they're nothing, maybe it's just a roof, but I know we're going up high here, and then we have this, and we have that. Maybe it's time for looking at the whole top of a house. I have no idea.
well, I think even if we want to task somebody to do that, I think we still want to move forward now with these changes and get them on the books, so we at least stop it now. And then we can address other changes as we see fit. But if we don't do this now, I think his email already said he's got a second builder looking at it that wants to do the same kind of thing, so.
Yeah, so we would take this back to the planning board. We can also take back your concerns with that uninhabitable space and see what kind of recommendations come back from the planning board on that also.
Yeah, I would suggest that people just ride around, if they see something that I know that it's not hard to see, that doesn't seem like it is what you're describing, that it is more than that, and it is close to what you're seeing here, if that made any sense. There's an awful lot of fancy tops, and, they just seem to be spaces that are going to be used for something.
Does the zoning board venture an opinion on the aesthetics of the design? Because when I rode by to look at this building, I think it's an ugly, it's a personal opinion, I think it's an ugly building.
Well, that's, they always say, you know, it's hard to legislate taste. So,
But does the zoning board,
the planning board, not the zoning, well, the zoning, I don't know, the zoning board often will say, fits
they're
in with the
coming in for-
neighborhood, and,
If
yeah,
they're
they
coming in
will.
for a variance, that's the only
Yeah,
time they
they
go to
will.
the zoning board.
The zoning board only gets jurisdiction when you're before them for a variance that's subject to their purview, otherwise it goes to the planning board.
Yeah,
So they handle D variances, they handle specific things that the planning board can't handle. And in that case, they can opine as to the design.
Right, so we don't know, or do we know, if that house that's on whatever street that is, went to the zoning board for a variance?
My understanding is it was permitted
yeah, that's
because
real.
there was, for lack of a better word, I guess, a credible threat of an appeal and litigation if it wasn't approved. And I think when Ray read the ordinance and it didn't say specifically what we're trying to say now, he felt unempowered to say, to issue a denial. So he approved the permit and then said immediately, let's get this before council, even before the planning board, so that we can get it. Because to go to the planning board, this is, in his view, and I think in all of, in my view, is really important, because right now, I could show up with a plan like this and get it approved. And
I
that's
go back
not
to
what
my
we want.
original point, that when confronted with an interpretation, shouldn't Ray have gone to somebody else to get an opinion, a different opinion, or another opinion?
I think
rather than
I think it's pretty clear if you read the ordinance now that it doesn't say that that is prohibited.
I hear what you're saying, but for 25 years, it was solid rock.
That's a good point.
You know, it wasn't challenged. I mean, again, we can argue the merits of this at a later date. I think the more important issue is to get this on the books so that we don't run into another situation like this in the next, you know,
I
2-3 weeks.
I agree with what you're saying. I guess my real concern, or another concern, is the idea that when faced with another question of interpretation, what does he do? Does he make the decision in favor of the designer?
I'm uncomfortable discussing employment.
I
Employment.
think, Frank, even if,
Correct?
I think that that's
if he had taken
beyond-
that to another, like you're saying, taking it to a higher authority or another official, that official, I think, would have been bound to read that ordinance and interpret it as it's read, not his own, well, you know, it says you're allowed 10 square feet, but we never allowed more than 8 in the past. That doesn't cut it. I mean, if it says 10, it's 10. It's not what the last guy did for the, you know, the past 10 years or whatever. So he probably would have, I would think, would have come up with the same answer.
I would counsel
Regardless of the
caution
threats.
against going farther down this road relative to the interpretation rendered by an employee. And he's charged with rendering this interpretation. If there's some issue the council wishes to discuss, I would suggest it's appropriate to do it in an executive session as opposed to in public session.
So I thought that we were initially going to be introducing this for a first reading tonight, but we are not. We're going to be doing a first reading in November. And this is going to go to the planning board October 28th, just to be looked at, like we're not introducing this.
Well, do we have to take that path?
I mean, we
That's what I'm saying. I was under the impression, but I don't see it on the agenda as a first reading. Or am I missing it?
I didn't see it either.
No, it's
Yeah, because I thought we were doing a first reading today. Nothing requires it go to the planning board, correct?
No.
No,
It's just a
no, because I was under the
It's just
impression
a
that we were,
courtesy to the planning board, correct.
and since it was something that we were being told by the zoning official was timely to get the discussion, and even though we don't like doing this, that we would then be introducing it.
Beyond that, if council wishes to introduce, you can submit it to the board for their comments as a courtesy
Right,
in between first and second reading and solicit their opinion.
which I think, you're right, that's what our conversation was, to do that.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think we should do it. I think, because if we wait to go to the planning board, we're going to lose another 4, 5, 6 weeks.
Right, and also this is that long month.
We don't want that.
There's 3
hanging out.
weeks,
Correct.
which I thought was one of the other reasons that
And we do have the draft, so you can just bring the draft forward, correct?
Anything more on that? So I'm looking around at everybody, we are going to do a first reading today in the regular meeting. Okay. Any more on this? Okay. Back to you, Jill, CFO.
Okay, next is Jim will go over the best practices survey submitted to us by the state.
So yeah, we got the best practices survey. It's a little bit different than the prior years in that this year it's online. It's on the state's online portal instead of an Excel spreadsheet that we email. Another change is there's 84 questions up from 61, and they're broken down as 38 for core competencies, 15 best practices, 31 unscored questions. Some of the questions are worth 1 point, some are worth 0.5, and some are worth 0. We have, you need 30 points to get 100% of the state aid. We have 42, and so we're in a very good spot. I did realize that question number 39 I answered no to, and it is prospective. The funding for that is in the 2020 capital budget to do the off-site backups. And if there's any questions, we can discuss them, or?
So that changes to a yes.
Yeah, it changes to a perspective from a no. Yeah.
Yeah, so you do this yourself, Jim, correct?
Well,
You answer these questions, you're,
Yeah, and Jill answered, yeah.
I assist
Right?
him,
Yes.
but yes, it's part of his responsibility.
So we have, and this is just for my own benefit, 42, you said 42 points?
Yeah,
I
42
mean,
points. Yes.
so what happens if you have 60 points? I mean, is
Well-
there any benefit to us to have 60 points?
Well, I don't think, I don't know what the maximum number of points are. But, obviously we want to have it as, accurate as possible.
So we pay, yeah, so what you're saying is we pass the requirement that we need to pass? Because some of the things it look like they'd be pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's worth doing if there's really no gain to us going forward. So
Yeah, you're right, and as I was going through some of it, I've already made little notes to myself on ones that I think are easy to
Right.
pick up on. And I think Jim had said it before, every year the questions are different. Some are very similar, but then they add new facets to it. Cybersecurity was a big one this year, I noticed. And a lot of other ones where they're asking the questions, but they're not counted in your scoring. So I think the state's just trying to get some information from the towns. The key is you want to be above that percentage, because if you're below it and you get significant state aid, which we don't, but there are communities out there that get a lot of state aid. I'll use Atlantic City as an example. If they score below, a percentage of their state aid gets reduced. So that's crucial in those communities. Good or bad, we don't get a lot of state aid.
Right.
Very, very minimal. But what we do get, we will get 100% of, because we are above the minimum.
And just as a comparison, do you know what the figure was for last year? I mean, it's, obviously passed,
Yeah,
but just a question
He's gonna
whether,
pull it up.
whether we're gaining on it or losing on it.
well, it's kind of hard to see, because like I said, they changed the categories. So you might score really, really well in one thing, and then the next year they bring something else up that we may not, so that might bring you down, and then another year you might go up. But the key is to stay a lot higher on the percentage than what the minimum is.
Yeah, so, and again, last year, there was more of this year, they're just giving you points for certain questions and half points for other questions. Last year, we answered 97%, which was affirmative or prospective. There were 61 questions, 40 were yeses, 2 nos, 15 were not applicable, and 4 were prospectives. But there was a big change in questions this year from the prior year.
As a percentage, it's
Yeah.
pretty similar.
Yeah.
Any other questions on it?
Do you want to do a combination of the reports and their capital budgets
We can.
as they come up?
Yeah, we can. I just have to pull their,
Oh, I have to get up. Okay.
Joe, are you going to
first
give
up
handouts
is-
on these?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you going to have handouts on these?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Are you going to give handouts on this material?
We gave handouts to the public, and there should be one in everybody's box.
I didn't see it.
You didn't get,
Oh, did you get?
Thank you.
does everybody have one? Do you guys all have your handout? Okay, first up will be the fire department. Roger?
Good afternoon. I'll start with my monthly report for September, if that's okay. We had a quiet month last month of 18 calls compared to 32 the previous year. We're still way ahead for our year totals. EMS had 37 calls, and the previous year we had 57. Again, we're still up from our busy summer. There's really nothing great to report, so that's my report. You have a copy, I think. First item is a replacement for a 4x4 SUV. This SUV is replacing a 2007 Dodge Durango. If anyone wants to take a look at it, it's sitting in the parking lot over there. It's rusting away, over 100,000 miles. Pretty much it's $48,000. We are working with the police and Jill to try to get a hand-me-down police Tahoe, if there's one available, if the police were to get a new Tahoe. But I need to put this in the budget anyway if it doesn't work out. So, but that's the hope, is that we can get one of the hand-me-down police Tahoes, then the police can get a new Tahoe. Any questions about that? All right, the next item is upgrading our extrication tools. We currently have extrication tools that use a gas-powered power unit. The new technology that's available now is battery-operated extrication tools. We have priced the new tools, and they are very expensive, and we found that we can upgrade our current tools to battery, which is about 1/3 of the cost of the new tools. So we'll be upgrading our cutter and our spreader on our squad unit to battery-powered tools for $15,000. Next item is upgrading our security cameras in the firehouse. In April, we had a break-in at the firehouse, and we have a camera system that's 15 years old, and we found it wasn't operating correctly. It's a DVR system, and now the new camera systems are all cloud-based. We tried to get in with the borough's security system. Jim looked at that budget, but there wasn't money in this year's budget to take care of that, so we have that in for next year to upgrade our camera system. And that is basically using our present cameras. I think it's putting a new cloud-based system in, using the present wiring system, installing new cameras to make this firehouse more secure. Hopefully, we'll never have a problem again with a break-in. The next item, and that was all for the 2020 budget. In 2021, we have to purchase new self-contained breathing apparatus for all the fire vehicles with extra bottles. Our current bottles are 20 years old and after next year cannot be used. The bottles are carbon fiber bottles, and next year they'll reach their life expectancy when they can't be hydro tested anymore, so they cannot be utilized. So that's $210,000 in next year's budget, or 2021's budget, for the purchase of new air packs. We have replaced the 2005 ambulance in 2022, or 23? 23, 2023. I'm hoping that will not need to be replaced. I'm hoping we can keep pushing that back. We're in a good place right now with both of our ambulances, but I'm hoping I can push that back. But I wanted to put that in there for the part of our apparatus replacement plan. But that is a vehicle we can look at to see if it's still usable. And we will look at that time, we will look at remounting our ambulance. The newest technology now is they take the box off the old ambulance and put it on a new chassis, which is a savings. And we'll take a look at that in 2022 to see where that stands. And the last item is 2024, and this is part of our 15-year replacement plan that we have in place, and that we'll be replacing our 2010 ladder truck we're estimating $850,000. I messed up here. 2022 is replacing our turnout gear. NFPA requires a replacement of turnout gear at 10 years, and in 2022, our turnout gear will be 10 years old. We received all the turnout gear we have now through a federal grant. It'll be 10 years before that. There's probably no way we'll get another federal grant for that, so we have that in to replace in 2022. Any questions?
Okay, and then we have a public safety meeting at the end of the month where we'll go into more detail with this and the other public safety departments as they come up.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Okay, police department.
Good afternoon. The monthly report for the police department, excuse me, there were 129 motor vehicle stops and 3 adults were arrested. In terms of personnel, our newest hire, Officer Santini, continues to attend the Cape May County Police Academy with an expected graduation date in January of 2020. We currently have 2 SLEO 2s supplementing Squad 2, which is where Officer Santini will work on as he attends the Cape May County Police Academy. And our 2020 SLEO 1 and 2 hiring process is underway. The interviews actually began yesterday. So that's an ongoing process. The transition of our dispatch communications to the county is continuing. We're getting ever closer. Looks like we'll be there sometime in December. We actually have a meeting with the CAD vendor coming up this week. And our radios actually just came in at the end of last week. With respect to the capital, project number 1, excuse me, is a new ALCO test machine. The money that we requested, which is $20,000, we've carried in our capital request since 2015. Since 2015, the state police has advised us every year that a new machine will be coming out. And what do you know, every year it has not come out. We were told last year that absolutely earlier this year, absolutely in 2020, it's supposed to come out, and then a few weeks ago, that kind of went from an absolute to probably a 2021. But I put it in for 2020, and then you'll see that I subsequently put it in for the years after that until we receive word that it's going to be replaced. Project 2 is an annual request to replace computers. We replace them on a rotation type basis, usually 3 every year. That's just an annual request, so we're current with soft grades and technology. Number 3 is the annual patrol vehicle replacement, which we did not request last year, just due to the fact we did not want to feel ungrateful for everything that was afforded to us with the building. It does put us a little bit behind now, but you know, when you weigh everything out, building compared to a car, you know, we'll go with the building every time. So that estimate is about $45,000 for a new patrol SUV. That will not add any additional cars to our fleet. As Chief Stanford said, we rotate one out, and we'll probably rotate one out to the fire department. As DPW, I don't know if you're aware of it, DPW rotated one of their cars out to us recently, and we're going to rotate one out to the fire department, which seemingly is working very well. Number 4 is a video redaction system software program. With the advent of the body cameras and the mobile vehicle recorders, that's the cameras in the cars, you know, I never thought we'd be requesting something like this, but there's, anytime there's a request for information, specifically a video recording that's due to an OPA request, a court order, or a subpoena, we have to provide that, and certain portions of that video have to be redacted out due to privacy issues. The prosecutor's office has helped us in the past with that, but they just can't do it. It's just too much. So we decided to put in for our own system this year, and that's $59.90. And that vendor is the same vendor that we currently have our body cameras and car cameras through. Number 5 is body armor, ballistic vest replacement. Every year we replace, seemingly every year we replace at least 1 to 2 vests. We get grant funding of about $2,000 a year, but there's certain years, due to the rotation of the vests, they're good for 5 years. Due to the rotation, in next year we'll need 3, and as you'll see in the other paperwork, in 2022 we'll need 5, at least 5, based on the grant money we receive and then the capital request. So it kind of fluctuates back and forth. And then when we have officers leave, so we just bought 4 new vests every year so far, for at least 1 vest every year. Those vests are not basically useless, but every time we hire a new officer, we can't give them the other vest. We have to buy a new one. We actually rotate them down to the Class 2s because they're good for 5 years, but we're not allowed to, if I leave, my replacement isn't allowed to take my vest. So it kind of puts us behind a little bit. And they're about $1,000 a piece. Number 6 is the body-worn camera replacement, and that's for next year. Our maintenance contract warranties actually end on December 20th of next year. As of this moment, our vendor does not have a projection for coverage into 2021. So it almost becomes a thing of, which I've been told by Captain Palmer, who's a tech kind of person. He's used the word controlled obsolescence. He related it to me like your cell phones. After a while, it just doesn't pay to continue to, because as the years go by, the warranty price goes up because the machines are getting older. So it just becomes a thing of fiscal responsibility to actually replace them rather than to continue to pay high-priced maintenance warranties. And as of 2020, 12/20 of 2020, we'll be out of our maintenance contract. I was talking to Mr. Dallahan prior to the meeting, and my feeling on this request is we will put in for the request. If it's approved, we won't use it until necessary. We'll run those cameras out until we have a problem, and then purchase as we go. And the last is replacement for the New Jersey State Police and the CJIS, which is Criminal Justice Information System router hardware. This is a technical piece of equipment that is it's necessary for security compliance with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this is related to our motor vehicle lookups, nationwide warrant checks, things of that nature. The state is picking up the cost currently up until 2024 or thereabouts, and then after that, we have to pick up the cost, so it's about $4,500. But that's a necessity. And I believe that's, not to say that's all I have, but I'm at the end of my list. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Beach Patrol.
Good afternoon. The last day that we had guards on the beach was September 22nd. It was a Sunday, and it was really not, there weren't that many less people than there were 2 weeks before that. So I think it's smart that we keep people down on the stands as long as we can in September, as long as the weather is agreeable. It seems that the types of people that vacation here that time of the year are from out of the area, and they're very unfamiliar with the water, and we had some rescues and things, and they're always where there aren't guards on duty. So it's always where we don't have, where we would typically have guards. And they just go out too far, or they get pulled out on a rip, and we have to go get them. As far as the capital, for 2020, Jill, we had discussed that I don't know what would need to be put in for 2020 as far as the planning or design of the headquarters.
Correct. We're just noticing on here that you would have to have that, but that depends on, once we get to the point where we're actually doing construction, but that's to be determined at this
Okay.
point. But we just wanted to put a placeholder on that.
Okay. We need a new walkie-talkie system. The system we have is very unreliable. We have a lot of problems, and sometimes they don't communicate. They fail in the middle of the day. The chargers don't work right, and it's really it's very important that we have a good, reliable system. And we could use a new lifeboat. We have 10 boats that float. We have a few more than that, but they're not really boats. They don't really float. We constantly repair them, and then we rotate them out onto the beach. And they last about 10 years. So if we have 10 reliable boats, generally we try and get one every year or every other year so we don't fall behind. 2021, we'll need rescue paddle boards. They only last about 3 years, and they're the long surfboards that we put on the beaches that don't have the lifeboats. And they're very useful. Also in 2021, we have a 6-year-old ATV. You've probably seen it, the 6-wheeled vehicle. It's getting a little old now, and the reliability is questionable. I think we can get through next summer with it, but I don't know about the summer after that. For 2022, at some point around this time, we'll need to buy oars. They're actually quite expensive. We don't buy them that often. but they're pretty expensive. And another lifeboat at that point, and somewhere probably around that year, we would need to purchase the furniture, filing desks, anything that, like that, for the tagger areas, the beach patrol, the deck, everything for that new building. 2023, we have a wave runner that is a 2012, and I would think even taking care of it by that point, it'll be 11 years old, it probably, somewhere around that year, we'll probably have to replace it, and it would need a trailer. And then 2024, another boat, and then the paddle boards again. So it's really the same equipment over and over. We don't have, it's pretty simple. Any questions?
Okay, next, municipal court. There's no capital, but you can give your report.
Good afternoon. The court is running smoothly. As I've told you before, we're getting ready for our annual state visitation. At the end of the month, that is when my vicinage comes in to make sure we're doing everything on the way the state wants it. And they usually let the mayor know when it has been being scheduled and when it's done and how good we do. We've been doing good for years now, so hopefully it continues. My capital budget is zero for the next 5 years because the state provides all my computers, the borough does not. I have borough computers that are working properly, and I have been told that the CFO has that in a line item that I don't have to require in my budget. So all my equipment is fairly new. I'm hoping my copiers last for the next 7 years. It's only a year and a half old. New printer is a year old, so it should last for quite some time. And my shredder. So everything was purchased probably within the last 2 years. And if they don't last for the next 5, I will be upset. Any questions?
Thanks, Deb. Okay, Jonathan, OEM. And no capital.
I feel like I should ask for something. Okay, good afternoon. So we had a pretty significant flooding event, as I'm sure any of you who live in town are aware, Friday through Saturday, October 10th through 11th. Actually ended up turning into a post-tropical storm, Melissa, which was a nor'easter, and then it morphed into this storm. I just want to give a thumbs up to Public Works and the police department. Did a great job. I got calls from multiple business owners in the 9500 block. They were very happy with the way that things are starting to flow with getting the barricades up. I know Chief now, it's a part of their checklist, so it just happens automatically, and people were very happy. We will start working on renewing the emergency action plan for next year. I've actually started working on that. There's not going to be a whole lot of changes to it, just updating dates and any personnel. So we will do that. And that's really it, nothing else.
Okay. Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, next would be recreation.
Afternoon. Okay, so the first thing that I would put as a priority would be Project 1, would be 97th Street Recreation Complex improvements. Me, Mr. de Blasio, and Grant met on site on 97th Street, and we've noticed that on First Avenue, some of the retaining walls and the concrete work is about 25 years old. And it needs to be replaced as it's deteriorating facing First Avenue where the rolling fence is that surrounds the basketball court. So we're in the process of applying for an open space grant with that would take care of hopefully a larger portion of the cost for that. But just to give down kind of the line items that are included in the 97th Street project would be the concrete retaining wall. And again, these don't have a price tag on it as of right now because we're waiting on to get them back. Extending the basketball courts, if you ever played on 97th Street basketball court, if you shoot like a three-pointer from the side, your foot's actually out of bounds. So the courts just, I know that we're not professional, but if we have the space to do it, we probably should make it somewhat of a minimum requirements of a court. New basketball, backboard, and rims, as of right now, they're fixed in place and they're very severely outdated and rusted. And then we've talked about, I don't know how moving forward with this, but changing the tennis playing surface to a hard surface. As of right now, the revenue that comes in for tennis rentals on 97th Street is around $1,000 in the summer. Pickleball alone brings in close to $27,000. So we were going to talk with the rec advisory committee about possibly changing that to a hard surface and having more pickleball courts available. Because as of right now, we have 2 courts at the 82nd Street complex that are blended lines to support the amount of pickleballers that we have. We see about 300 daily in the summertime, and it is paying for itself as far as what it's bringing in revenue. A lot of the feedback is just the surface down at 97th Street is outdated. It's very slippery. My tennis pro doesn't, a lot of his professional lessons, they do not want to have their lessons down at 97th Street because of the surface. So that definitely plays into part as far as the revenue that comes in. And then changing, everyone's been down 97th Street. The playground surface is mulch at the moment, and it's unable to keep sanitary. It's deteriorating away. Most of it dirt. So we were talking about pouring the surface to a solid surface, something similar to what's down at Chelsea. And then we also discussed about moving the bocce courts to the shuffleboard area. And in that area where the bocce courts are, we could have a location for Family Fun Night, which is now currently held in the parking lot next to the firehouse. They had the bleachers down there before for the Family Fun Night. It happens every Monday, 7 to 7:45. And the bleachers that were there were scratching up the memorial bricks, so we had to move it to the parking lot. We see about, on average, there's about 50 to 60 kids that come every Monday, Family Fun Night, and just the proximity close to the firehouse, it's just not safe in my opinion. I know that Thursday, the firehouse has open houses and everything, but if we could designate an area to Family Fun Night, maybe like, I know that there's a pavilion there now, and then the entertainment can set up there, it would be more accommodating. We were talking about having a building that well suits if we change the surface and how we can accommodate that area. And then maybe possibly replacing the surrounding fence. Some of it has been replaced as the years have gone by. So there's pieces that don't need to replace, but then if we go ahead and get the funding for the open space grant, we would just replace everything and start brand new. So that's a pretty big project that we're talking about. The current playground equipment there right now is about 15 years old. So it is outdated and needs to be replaced. So that's the first one, and that was a pretty big one. The second one is purchasing a new street legal utility vehicle. This is for more or less for our facilities manager, Mr. Gear. He had a hand-me-down vehicle from the fire department, which we were very grateful for, but it served its time and is now in the garage, basically used for scrap parts. It lasted the whole summer though, so we were very thankful for that. It makes it difficult for him to perform the required duties if he has to go from 82nd Street to Chelsea to change out a swing. He has to go and then put all of his equipment from the golf cart or the gem car into another vehicle. So if he had a vehicle that was designated for him to be able to make his rounds for the different recreation locations, that'd be great. Grant went ahead and did some research, and we were able to get a really good deal on the 2016 John Deere. So that was based on Grant's recommendation, because Public Works are also the ones that also do any of the maintenance and mechanic work that needs to be done. So I went with his recommendation. The third one, if you look at the pavilion down at 82nd Street, the sections of the court were poured separately. So the foul shot area is one separate pour, the three-point area is a separate pour, and now as the ground settled, it's creating about some divide between the playing surface. So it's becoming uneven, and we're skinning our teeth with JIF as far as the separation, and it could be served as obviously a huge safety hazard. So we looked into Pro Sport, which is the same company that did our tennis courts. They do a great job compared to, I'm not quite sure, the company that came in before, but he's actually a local, Mr. Brogan. He's great. So he's gonna come in, sand down the entire existing concrete level, and add acrylic paint, so it will be the same exact surface that matches the tennis courts and the lower basketball court. Because as of right now, it's just concrete with paint on top of it. So he would come in and sand it all down flush, so it would be completely even, and then put all of everything that needs to happen to make that level.
Does that surface that he would put down allow for more give? Is there any?
Well, there is an additional option, and then I know that when we have the rec committee meeting,
Pretty hard surface right now, and when kids go down.
oh yeah, they go down.
hard.
Well, so Pro Sport also has kind of like a state-of-the-art, it's called Pro Cushion. And when it goes down, that year, it has a 20-year guarantee on it, and basically any surface cracking happens underneath that surface. So it's like a rubberized level.
I was more looking at it from
Right.
a injury standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So as of right now, he priced out $24,000 estimated for what he can do for that. But if we go for the Pro Cushion, it would be $42,000, and that would be with the rubberized surface. And he says that would be ideal for that place because it's actually covered. So it'll be protected from the elements. So if we were wanting to go with the Pro Cushion, that would be something that we would discuss in the rec advisory. But he did give a price for that as well. Okay, and actually this is the fourth one. I don't know why I came up with fifth. But we put down for ballpark, ball field improvements. So I think you might want to click one more. Did you go back one? 4? There it is. Sorry. That's all right. So in talking with Grant of Public Works, our ball field, it's the only one in town. It is in severe need of some improvements. So as of right now, the field needs to be leveled for safety reasons, and our outfield is approximately 25 feet larger than suggested. And this is we had a professional come down and look at it, and he said that most of the companies around here are selling their infield mix. They mix it with sand because it's such an abundant material that it creates a light infield mix. So if we get high winds, our infield is now becoming larger. So when we can get proper infield mix, which is more like, not like a clay, but it's a lot heavier, then our infield would stay in place and it wouldn't create these lips in our outfield, which is a huge safety hazard. Right now, we have Philly Sport League. They come down and do tournaments. We have a league, an adult league, and we run the kids' summer clinic all year, which is for 7 weeks, 4 days a week. So there's a lot of activity on that field. With these improvements, we can also host baseball and softball camps. So baseball and softball are the only 2 sports that we cannot accommodate camps for because of the condition of our field. So that would definitely bring in revenue, and then it would definitely help with the safety aspect of that. So he came in, and there's a report too, if you guys are interested in reading it, but he gave a full detailed report on his professional, what he's seen, and what he recommends. And then the last one is just replacing the 82nd Street basketball backboard and posts. As of right now, the posts down there are over 7 years old, and they're fully rusted out, again, which causes a safety issue. I know that being down at the shore, Barrier Island, with the salt air and everything, it's really hard to kind of keep things the way they're supposed to be. We have talked about maybe wrapping them in the off-season, so you could protect it from the elements. These are things that we're exploring, but for the time being, they definitely need to be replaced. And that is it. There was another project that was on here, which was to take care of the peeling tiles on 82nd Street, but we were able to, I reached out to the manufacturer whose tiles they were. There's a 20-year guarantee on their product, and they came down from Canada and deemed that the issue was an installation issue. So they have went forward, and they're standing behind the product, and they are coming in whenever the weather can be at least the 70s, and they're going to re-glue the entire playground at no cost. So
Nice.
that definitely helps us out a lot with that. My report is, and just get ready for Halloween. If any of you know locals that are staying here, please urge them to register online. Once you register their house, we'll make up a map, and then we'll deliver little pumpkins, so everybody knows where they can go trick-or-treating.
I just have just a couple of general comments. And one is, just as you're considering changing the surfaces, make sure that we consider some of the environmentally sustainable products that are out
Absolutely.
there. Because, yes, there's a trade-off sometimes that they're more expensive, but I think it's important that we consider some options with
Sure,
some of
yeah,
those
yeah.
types of products. And then second, just a question as far as the budgeting. Not much after the next year as far as expected expenditures, and is that realistic?
Yeah, I think a lot of the issues that, in my observation, and I know that I've taken Joe around and kind of pointed out my concerns, is a lot of the facility surfaces. As far as that, we do a really good job of budgeting, 2 windscreens here, and then do that every year to keep it in the operating budget, so we don't ever have to go ahead and spend $40,000 on windscreens.
Good explanation.
Yeah, and Mr. Gear does a really good job too, is also, he's figured out a science where he puts the 100-pound zip ties on the bottom, 50 on the top, so if a wind does come along, we're not replacing a windscreen, we're just replacing a 10-cent zip tie. So as of right now, it's just realistically, our biggest concern are our playing surfaces.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tina, is the Recreation Advisory Committee still meeting monthly?
Yes, we're meeting, was it the 30th year?
The Citizens Committee she's talking about.
Oh, no, I don't even know about the last time that they met. I haven't met with them as far as the citizens. I've only met with the advisory committee that is accompanied by the council members.
Okay,
We could talk about it at the advisory committee.
that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, tourism, no capital.
No capital for me. But I am, currently our next borough event is the Island Holiday Event. I know it's not even Halloween, we're talking about Christmas, but actually it's the weekend of Thanksgiving, so we're scheduled for November 29th and 30th, that's Thanksgiving weekend. I've started scheduling the entertainment for Friday and Saturday. I'm working with the Chamber of Commerce just to put out a complete schedule of activities between the borough-sponsored events and then the business-sponsored events. I have offered the concession stands to local organizations, just waiting for their confirmations. The borough events are going to include pretty much what we did last year, scavenger hunt, the downtown holiday dash. There'll be kids' entertainment in the business district. We'll be doing a tree lighting with snow and caroling. We do have a carousel that's reserved for the weekends as well. Planning a pet parade for Friday, and working with the local business paw prints for that as well, same as last year. And the Christmas parade is scheduled for Saturday evening. Sent out the registration forms to past participants. Just starting to get all those back now. And started looking at the Christmas decorations that are over at Public Works. Tim and I went down there and looked at them, so we got to order. We're going to be needing, there's some new stuff, there's some old stuff that doesn't look like, it's going to make it this year, I don't know. But we are looking at some new Christmas decorations. And then the other thing I've started working on already is, believe it or not, is next year's Arts and Crafts Festival. The applications for that have to be ready November 1st, so I'm updating that website right now with the new layout and the new registrations for next year. So I'll be here before you know it. I don't know if anyone had questions for Christmas or...
No, thanks. Okay, next up is natural resources under capital. The first project is the continuation of our dredge and flood mitigation plans. We will, I budgeted 60,000 for the flood mitigation plan, which brings in the hazard mitigation, the watershed management, emergency operating plan. These will all be tied in together in one plan, and Mark will be working on that. The annual survey of the lagoons and the annual survey of the beaches. And the next is the Back Bay Dredge Maintenance Program. This year, we will be appropriating $345,000 into the reserve. And going forward, this is based on council's approved plan. 2021 will be $345,000. Then we would jump to $595,000 in 22, 23, and 24. And then the beach replenishment reserve, again, the same amount, $345,000 this year. And in 2021 and also, and then 2022, 23, and 24, we will increase the appropriations annually to $595,000. And then the last item is the signage updates under capital outlay. It'll be $1,500 for this year. And at this point, there's nothing projected moving forward for any signage. However, that's always subject to change depending on weather, and sometimes signs walk. Anybody have any question on these plans? Okay. And that is the end of our capital for tonight. And then Lenore, if you want to come up and just give your brief update on natural resource.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a few quick updates for you. The Natural Resources Committee held its quarterly meeting on October 8th and touched on several different areas. First one was quickly talking about Stone Harbor Point. New Jersey DEP has repositioned the area closure signs and moved them back from the nesting season to the migratory bird protection season. That those signs are further back now, so it's a smaller closure area. It also allows open driving lanes for fishermen to get down to the point. So those signs were moved back. In December, DEP will move them again, further back again, and at that point in time, they change out the wording on the signs to say no driving beyond this point, just trying to keep vehicles out of the dune area. And last year, we had some challenges with that where people didn't realize that since the sign said no vehicles, clearly that means people can go in the dunes. So we worked with Public Works, and they added some stay out of the dune signs, and that worked very well in terms of clarifying those messages. So we'll try to do that again this year when that flip over occurs. The bird sanctuary, sanctuary signage, the committee has moved to pretty close to final design for the new entryway signs that are part of the plan that was already budgeted. The committee, the Natural Resource Committee, looked at those signs and just reviewed them. We're in a final design. It would be good if we spelled Jersey correctly, you know, little things like that, that got by 92 people that already reviewed them. But we're anticipating the signs will be sent to the manufacturing company later, maybe even next week. So we should have them in hand by early December, which gives Public Works lots of time to get to installing them prior to kind of early spring. There's really, you know, we just kind of time it there when their schedule works best for that. The committee's continuing to work on the Phragmites control plan. That's being done by Princeton Hydro as the consultant leading that effort. They've started some of that. I will be meeting with them on site in the next couple of weeks to look at planning and access for that plan, and we're anticipating a work session with Clean Shores program that'll be out there. Typically, they come out in November, so we'll be looking at that and then trying to think about ways to focus the work they do to provide access for the rest of the planning that'll happen there. So those two efforts we're trying to have go hand in hand, so they're synergistic. A topic of discussion was the Dune project that was under consideration by the borough. Jill provided an overview at that meeting on the concepts and some of the pros and cons. Grant presented his planning with the Army Corps and DEP, discussed some of the challenges with crossover maintenance, and the committee discussed some possible approaches about crossover maintenance. It was just a subject there. I know you've already acted on that. There was some activity related to the Dune Vegetation Management Program. Aaron Baker from Lomax Consulting was in attendance at that meeting and contributed ideas to the Dune crossover maintenance challenges, as well as presented a proposal to the borough for the 83rd Street Japanese Black Pine removal and vegetation restoration project. That proposal mirrors the proposal they provided to the borough to manage and design the project that was completed at the 118th Street vicinity, 2 years ago now, 3 years ago? Time flies. And that their proposal is to support the borough, which will also involve mapping the trees that are going to be removed there, and some of the vegetation replacement plans. That proposal now goes to the property owners. That'll be cost sharing with the borough on a one-to-one basis. If the landowners accept that proposal, and I believe, I'm not positive the next steps, I believe that would then come to council for a project discussion and potential approval, and the timeline for that project would be spring, if we can get everything in place by then. Aaron also let the borough know that they've been contacted by a property owner on the north side of 89th Street, wishing to do a project as well. That project's in the early stage, so we didn't have that much information on it yet, just to kind of notify the committee that that project's in place. And there was a brief discussion regarding a dune disturbance at 118th Street that I'm sure you're all aware of now. On the flood mitigation front, there was a meeting held in September. You all have the minutes on that. The next meeting is October 29th, and I believe Jill's preparing a list of bulkheads that have already been updated and completed in their elevations, as well as the next group of bulkheads that would be subject to needing to move up. So we'll have a kind of a better handle just in terms of how the borough is moving through that process of elevating bulkheads. And then finally, the next beach sweep is October 26th. That's been advertised well, and I believe there should be a lot of folks out there. Hopefully we'll have another beautiful day. Unlike the next couple of days, I'm sure hopefully you've all been watching the next few days. Are going to be pretty intense with another nor'easter coming through, big winds. For those of us that get excited about how sediment moves around in bays, I'm pretty darn excited. And just a quick update, you're all aware of the work that's happening behind 7 Mile Island, trying to look at and think about ways to beneficially use dredge material to support our marshes. There are 3 sampling data collection platforms that were deployed out there in early October that are looking at waves and currents and how they're interacting, and also measuring sediment movement out there. So we've been lucky to already get some nice events, and we're getting another one. And we'll also be actually collecting sediment to see how it's moving around. So that kind of information will go into some of the design of some future projects. Right now, we're looking at one potentially innovative project to start in this winter, early spring, if we can get it permitted. So some of us are excited that it's going to blow like stink, I think, as they say down here in the terms. So that's my report. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I know we're kind of running behind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. I know we're running over. We do have one last item on the agenda that we haven't touched on. If we could get an update on the lifeguard building. I understand there was a committee met, or the building was discussed at some point in the last week or two.
Okay, so we did have a meeting. We had some feedback, comments that were made during that meeting. Bill McLeese, the project architect, took in those comments, and I believe within the next week, we're going to have a revised set of prints that took into account the comments that were made.
Okay. What were some of the comments, like what were issues discussed?
I believe there was talk about removal of some of the site amenities, i.e. the arbors and the seating areas. There was discussion about the materials on the turnaround. There was conversation pieces about less intricacies on the exterior. We talked about materials, we talked about functionality with Sandy and size.
What did you agree on? Overall square footage, did you agree on?
I believe generally speaking that the square footage and the functionality was to remain. The exterior was going to be pared down in terms of its complexity, and some of the site work was going to change.
Okay. How about anything as far as the restrooms?
I think we left it at the same size.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we left it at the same size, but we're also looking at, depending on how long it takes to get moving on the entire project, Public Works, I believe Grant, when he presents his budget, will have something in there for a temporary facility to be built there. And then, once we finalize whatever permanent building would go, we would take that building, the temporary building, and move it to the point. So
Okay.
you'll see, he'll present that the first meeting in November.
Okay.
His idea for that.
Interesting concept.
Some of the other
Yeah.
things we talked about was trying to incorporate a lot of the ideas that came out of the flood mitigation or flood committee about pervious pavement, rain gardens, taking some of the runoff and making like creative wetland swales and landscaping, et cetera. So this is on the outside, and the site was supposed to be like a sample project of things that the borough has discussed and where you want everybody to go, starting with yourself.
Okay.
And that portion will be part of our agenda when we meet on the flood mitigation at the end of the month.
Anybody on council have any questions about the building or where it's moving forward, or any comments or anything on that? Okay. Okay, sorry we ran over. So, anybody have anything else? Then what we'll do is we'll adjourn, we'll take 2-3 minute comfort break, and we'll come back and we'll start the council meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.